And that's 401. Dr. Maurana, why don't you take us away?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you to the first session in our four-part discussion series, The Medical Profession Through the Lens of Human Flourishing. My name is Dr. Cheryl Maurana, and I have the privilege of serving as the founding director of the Kern National Network for Caring and Character in Medicine. Next slide, please. As a brief introduction for those who are not familiar with the work of the Kern National Network, or KNN, our ultimate aim is to promote human flourishing within, across, and beyond the medical profession in order to positively impact individuals and communities in our society. We pursue this goal in collaboration with our 7 partner schools, shown here, and many others within the larger healthcare ecosystem. Next slide, please. Caring, character, and human flourishing are key constructs of this work and underpin our event this afternoon. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce these concepts and how they connect. On the screen, you can see the integrated framework that the KNN has developed, building on the work of Vanderbilt, Berkowitz, Toronto, and others to unify these ideas. Much as a tree's strong trunk and branches allow for thriving leaves, the interconnected concepts of caring and character can be seen as the structure that supports human flourishing and advances the profession of medicine. Brief definitions of each term give a general sense of what they encompass. But what does human flourishing really look like or mean, especially in these uniquely challenging times? And how do caring and character contribute in practice? Unpacking those questions is the focus of our session today. Building on those fundamentals, future sessions in our series will explore flourishing within several other timely contexts: seeking strength in times of crisis, pursuing health equity, and defining the role of medicine in civic responsibility and democracy. As you may suspect from those themes, caring, character, and flourishing operate in many forms and at many levels: individual, organizational, societal. They influence both our short-term, day-to-day moments, as well as our long-term growth, development, and aspirations. The pursuit of human flourishing is simultaneously an individual and a collective journey, one personal and professional. Next slide, please. Today we have 3 exceptional presenters who will be sharing in video form their personal and professional experiences with caring, character, and human flourishing. Dr. Andrea Leep joins us from the Mayo Clinic. Dr. Bonnie Miller holds roles with both Vanderbilt and the KNN Program Office. And Dr. John Luk works with the Dell Medical School at UT Austin. Our moderator, Dr. Stawski of the Kern Family Foundation, will facilitate a live Q&A with our speakers following the video portion. There will also be an opportunity to dialogue with your peers and reflect on your personal takeaways. Next slide, please. However, before we get started in earnest, there are just a few brief housekeeping items to cover. For the best experience, please select View in the upper right-hand corner and choose Speaker View from the drop-down menu. To submit questions, send a chat to Q&A by clicking the speech bubble and selecting Q&A from the menu. For questions not addressed live, we will follow up with answers in the near future. And finally, throughout this virtual event, let us extend grace to one another as we navigate screen sharing, audio-visual connections, and the ever-confounding mute button. With that set, we're ready to begin. Austin, please start the video. We hope these stories resonate and offer new perspectives. Thank you.
Apologies for the delay. I just have to get the video going.
What comes to your mind when you think about character? If you're a fan of theater, literature, even Netflix, you might think of a character in a play or a story or maybe a cartoon. If you're a linguist or love words, you might think of character as a written symbol that stands for a phonetic sound or for a word. If you're a historian, you might want to explore the etymology of the word. And if you did that, you'd discover that character's derived from a Greek word that means a stamping tool and carries with it the sense of making a distinctive mark. My name is Andrea Leep, and I'm a neurologist at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. I've been part of the Kern National Network's work on character over the past 3 years, and using language as our starting point for thinking about character is valuable because words and the way we use them are how we understand meaning and also how we create meaning. So exploring how we think and talk about character can help us understand what character is and how it relates to human flourishing. So what do we learn? First, we learn character is embodied and distinctive. It resides within us as individuals, or at least that's how we experience it. Character's not just a list of ethical principles or values. Rather, these become part of our character when they're an internalized part of who we are. And when they do, they reflect our unique stories, journeys, and sociocultural contexts. Second, character's enacted. We know the characters from our favorite shows because they're literally acted. And we make inferences about the character of others based on what they do, and our own character is revealed by what we do under stress or in positions of power, forcing us to confront the complicated tangle of virtue and vice that lives inside us all. Third, character is meaningful. Written markings are not a character unless they stand for something, unless they have a meaning that transcends the marks themselves. In the same way, we can't understand character or virtue without grappling with bigger questions about purpose and meaning. They're intimately intertwined. Finally, character is engraved. Imagine that you're holding a carving tool. Imagine pressing that tool into the hard surface of a stone. Feel the time, the effort, the patience required to engrave that stone. Character growth is not something that happens overnight. It's time-consuming and effortful. It requires patience with ourselves and with others. But character is also enduring by virtue of that same hardness, yielding integrity, consistency over time, and resilience in the face of adversity. As the Kern National Network for Caring and Character, we've created a definition of character that tries to capture the richness of this linguistic history, while also acknowledging our sociocultural embeddedness and the power of situational cues. The definition reads like this: character is the complex constellation of psychological characteristics that motivates and enables individuals to act as moral agents. That comes from the work of Berkowitz. Character traits are developmentally dependent and contextually formed over time. Character manifests in dispositions and practices which are influenced by situations and valued according to the sociocultural context. Character so conceived involves both content and process. The content of character is traditionally understood in terms of virtues and vices, reflecting long traditions in philosophy and religion, or more recently in positive psychology with its focus on character strengths. The process of character has also been extensively studied and is understood as unfolding both at a moment in time and over the course of a lifetime as we grow and develop as human beings. We hope this definition and ways of thinking about character can serve as starting points for conversations about character and virtue and how they relate to human flourishing generally and in the health professions specifically. Because character challenges us to move beyond questions of competence that ask, "What can I do?" to questions of identity that ask, "Who am I and who am I becoming?" And even further, to questions of meaning and purpose that ask, "Why am I and how should I live?" Asking and answering these questions is essential to move beyond a sort of superficial happiness that is so often bound up in our life circumstances, to a deeper and richer flourishing for ourselves, our patients, our communities, and our world.
I'd like to start with a story. A 10-month-old girl was admitted to the hospital with tetralogy of Fallot, the classic blue baby syndrome treated surgically for the first time in 1944, in a daring feat that extended the bounds of what was thought to be humanly possible. The celebrated white surgeon and his unheralded black technician had practiced for months in the laboratory to master the new techniques. Now, many decades later, operative repair is routine, and this baby's story should have been forgettable. But Allie remembered the baby well. Over a year later, she stood in front of her medical school classmates and presented the baby's case, not to unravel the mystery of cardiac anomalies, but to probe a far more complicated mystery. Why congenital heart disease is deadlier for Black babies than white babies. I listened in the back of the classroom, ostensibly the teacher, as Allie led a thoughtful discussion that elucidated reasons for the disparities. There are no wayward race-related genes, just commonplace social and economic woes, like the ones that shaped the lives of this baby's family. Recently moved from New York City to a town 50 miles away to escape financial hardship. A job promised that never materialized, leaving both parents temporarily unemployed. A gap in the baby's Medicaid coverage. 2 other school-aged children, 1 car, no gas money, no extended family support. No time to pursue the baby's follow-up care until she became dangerously ill. Allie had been assigned to the medical team overseeing the baby's treatment, and the team didn't know any of this at first. They were excellent doctors, but they were busy, and all they'd seen was a very sick baby who should have had an operation months ago. The mother and father were bad parents, often absent, always adversarial, and oblivious to their daughter's grave condition. Over the course of the hospitalization, the situation had only deteriorated, and it wasn't clear that the baby would receive the treatment she needed. While it wasn't Allie's intent in telling this story, she gradually emerged as its hero. So how could a clerkship student end up being the hero of a story like this, about a sickly child who desperately needed a heart operation? It was through the completeness of her caring. Caring, as the KNN defines it, involves more than excellent medical treatment or exhibiting a kind demeanor. These are necessary, but they are not sufficient. Based on the works of Virginia Held, Milton Myeroff, and others, the KNN definition states that caring is a blend of practices, dispositions, and motivations, all aimed at ensuring that individuals and populations grow, develop, and flourish as best they can. It derives from the moral basis of caring relationships in which those who give care act intentionally and deliberately to nurture and uplift those who receive care. In her writings on the value of caring in our society, Joan Tronto, a political scientist and ethicist, deconstructed this kind of caring into 5 moral elements: attentiveness, responsibility, competence, responsiveness, and respectful, engaged citizenship. Allie practiced all of these elements, and in doing so, she cooled the simmering hostilities that had developed, cleared misconceptions, and allowed the baby's parents to accept a treatment plan. So how exactly did she do it? Well, Allie was keenly attentive. She inquired and listened and uncovered information that told an entirely different tale about the parents' behavior. They were not bad parents. In fact, they were devoted parents, just confused, frightened, and depleted. And Allie was responsible. Once she understood the financial challenges faced by the baby's parents, Allie didn't simply commiserate with them. She related the full story to social workers who were then able to issue meal tickets and gas cards for the daily visits and trips back and forth. She was responsive, frequently checking back on the parents and building their trust and understanding and ensuring that her efforts helped to ease their concerns. And she was a respectful, engaged citizen, learning about the obstacles people face in trying to achieve optimal health and honing the skills needed to advocate for equity. Allie did not yet have the technical competence of the cardiologist who stabilized the baby's condition or the surgeons who repaired her heart, but she understood that developing her own competence in medical school was about much more than getting good grades. Competence is a moral imperative, not a technical to-do list, if one is to become a truly caring physician. Although it was not originally developed for medicine or healthcare, this comprehensive framework will direct the KNN's efforts in promoting caring. The 5 elements can provide guidance for teaching, assessing, and measuring outcomes within health professions education, within health professions, and within the health ecosystem. While caring for patients remains central in this framework, it also requires that we care for our teams, our institutions, our communities, and our democracy, so that the conditions that enable equitable flourishing can prevail.
I thought I was a pretty good teacher on bedside rounds. One morning, I led my team into a room with a young boy with asthma. Confident in my approach, I strode past the bed to greet his parents and started a bedside conversation, only to be interrupted by the young boy who had watched me so intently as I and my team entered the room. That interruption proved faithful to me in my journey of human flourishing as a physician. As a pediatrician, I believe the World Health Organization's 1948 definition of health, that health is a state of complete mental, physical, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. I had thought up to that faithful encounter, I had successfully integrated the learnings of my primary care experiences into hospital practice. Evidently, I had not. Back to that encounter on morning rounds. It had proceeded as a typical morning of bedside teaching and family discussions. I had not expected the interruption and was caught off guard by it. His simple words proved consequential and catalyzed in me an inflection of my human flourishing journey. Dr. Tyler Vanderwilt of the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard's Institute of Quantitative Social Science elaborated in 2017 that human flourishing centers on 5 domains: happiness and life satisfaction, mental and physical health, meaning and purpose, character and virtue, and close social relationships. Each of these is nearly universally desired, and each constitutes an in of itself. He further proposes 4 pathways to realize human flourishing: family, work, education, and religious community. Up until that encounter with the young boy with asthma, I would have confidently asserted that I was promoting and teaching good health in my practice. This young boy summoned up his courage to interrupt me as I was speaking with his parents. Hello, hello, you should be speaking with me. I'm your patient. Those words got to me like a thunderclap. After a brief pause, I turned to him and got on his eye level. I'm sorry. You're right. Thank you. How are you? That simple interaction over a decade ago remains vivid to me as an inflection of my journey, one that has become more deliberate, mindful, and balanced. To me, human flourishing is a dynamic journey in many dimensions, continuously informed by my surroundings, circumstances, existence, relationships, and events. My state of mind and beliefs filter my perceptions of those external inputs and make sense of my ever-changing set of understanding. I further believe that my human flourishing has been a journey of seeking balance in the realities and learnings, the good fortunes, the helpful hands, the stumbles, joys, heartaches, my community, my family. The totality of my life experiences, from being a war refugee, a first-generation college student, and first physician in the family, has been my epic journey in human flourishing. I'm far from done. A second, more personal inflection occurred more recently. The death of my father triggered in me an introspective and spiritual journey. The close of my father's life led me to a realization that my human flourishing journey has been about cultivating my legacy. I can see more clearly that my human flourishing journey can be best elaborated by my personal mission and vision. My personal mission is to be a worthy role model for my children. My personal vision is to leave the world a better place for my children. I'll close with an original poem, a tribute to my father, one of my role models of human flourishing, a reflection of my father's legacy. This poem is entitled Finality. In a heavy moment, slowed by the weight of mournful attention, gathered around the paternal giant as orange, yellow, and red flecks have faded gradually from the weathered arms, casting a proud shadow of its rugged and unrelenting push to touch the clouds. Many little and big ones assume its mantle as they take over the charge of pulling the earth. The clouds don't seem that distant. The giant is part of the forest. We can see the sun. Rest now. You've done a good job. We'll take it from here. I hope that my story has piqued in you the opportunity to tell your story, your human flourishing journey. I thank the Kern National Network for Caring and Character in Medicine and its amazing team for the invitation and opportunity to share my story on human flourishing. I look forward to hearing yours. Thank you.
So welcome back, and thank you to Andrea and Bonnie and John for your respective and moving presentations on character, caring, and human flourishing. My name is Stawski, and I'm serving as the moderator for today's event. As we transition into the Q&A portion of the event, I'll pose specific questions to each of the presenters for their response. As a reminder, please feel free to submit questions to Q&A via the chat feature in Zoom. I may be able to select a few questions for conversation in this session if time permits, but all questions will be answered afterward in communication to today's participants. To kick off our conversation, let me start with Andrea. Andrea, you spoke about character, and I'm thinking about what are the character strengths and virtues are required of a good doctor, and how well do these align with what the culture of medicine rewards and supports?
So thank you for that question, Chris. It's it's an interesting question because, and I was just talking about this last week too, that, the idea of the goodness of something depends on the purpose, right? And so I think starting that conversation, there's that classic analogy, right, about is a watch may be good for telling time, but not hammering nails and checking reflexes and things like that. So starting out with that idea of, what is a doctor for? And that's where I really love this work by Larry Churchill and David Schenk, I think, about extraordinary clinicians framing them as healers. And really contrasting that with the culture of medicine now, which sometimes leans a little bit, sometimes a lot, toward construing physicians as fixers, or as kind of overemphasizing that technical skill, or as producers, volume, revenue, procedural yield, that sort of business talk. But if you start out with the idea of physician as a healer, they interviewed 50 clinicians from various professions related to healthcare who were really exemplary healers. And the list that came out there was things we would recognize: respect, integrity, compassion, empathy. And then I think some others that maybe have received less attention, humility and patience, for example. And then, maybe I think we've talked a lot more about courage and justice in this last year in light of COVID and attention to systemic racism and issues of that nature. But, some of those latter four are things that haven't been as frequently elevated as maybe they should be. And when you think about what the practice of medicine supports, the types of things that came to mind for me, I'd be interested to see what other things, but the idea of confidence, diligence, excellence, responsibility, self-discipline, lots of good things. But part of the beauty of a character or virtue framework is it brings this idea of wisdom. How do you keep confidence from becoming superiority, diligence from becoming workaholism, excellence from becoming perfectionism, that sort of thing. I think there are some liabilities about our culture too that come along with some of those same strengths.
Thank you. I mean, as a quick follow-up and thinking about this kind of healer versus fixer dynamic, if you think about it from a character perspective, should we focus then on building our strengths and thinking of positive psychology, or improving our weaknesses? What do you think?
Well, so, and some of you on this conversation may know a lot about positive psychology. My understanding is there's quite a bit of evidence to back the idea of leveraging your strengths and channeling your strengths. I like to think of that in the frame of stewardship. We've all been given and opportunities to nurture and develop different strengths that we can bring to our work and our lives. And being a good steward of that is, I think, part of what leveraging and focusing on your strengths is about. But on the flip side, boy, there's a lot of meaningful work and meaningful growth that comes out of weakness, right? And without thinking about and engaging with our weaknesses, boy, I don't know, improving might even be too aspirational a word, at least for me, it feels like a constant battle. But these things, they help keep a person humble, approachable, relatable, authentic. And that part's important too. And it makes me think of this. I pulled out a quote from that David Brooks book about the road to character, about how the purpose of struggle against weakness is not to win because it isn't possible, but to get better at waging it. And I remember underlining that quote in the book because it seemed like a powerful thing. It's a lot easier to avoid your weaknesses than to grapple with them. And weaknesses make us think outside ourselves, right? Because we need other people on our team to bring those strengths that our patients need, that our society needs. And so that's another advantage, I think, of grappling with weaknesses, is it helps us look outside ourselves to the people around us who can help us.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Let me transition to Bonnie. Bonnie, you spoke of the 5 elements of caring from Joan Toronto. Do you believe that one of those elements is more important than others in the context of healthcare? And are there particular obstacles to learning or practicing this kind of caring?
Sure, and thanks, Chris. And I think it's pretty impossible to say that one is truly more important than the others. And I think it depends a lot on your perspective, probably. Certainly as medical educators, especially over the past 20 years, we focused a whole lot on competence and competency-based educational approaches and observable skills, observable characteristics, and how to measure those. And so I think whether or not educators would say that competence is most important, certainly that's where we spend a lot of our time. I think, though, if you ask patients, they may give you a different answer. And in fact, a few weeks ago, I did have the opportunity to ask patients that question, what does caring look like to you? What do caring physicians look like to you? And we're still kind of looking at the responses, and we'll do some analysis of that. But one thing that came out really very clearly was listening. And that almost the hallmark of a caring physician was somebody who actually took the time to listen. And so that kind of correlates with the attentiveness. And I think you can think about attentiveness and listening almost as the gateway to caring, because if you don't listen and you don't hear not just what's being said, sometimes it's what's not being said, of course, sometimes it's body language, that attention to what's happening in the moment then you miss things, and people don't feel heard. And if you don't feel heard, then you just don't feel cared for. And so I think that from the perspective of the patient, that may be what they would say is most important. And it's hard for me not to agree with that. Just by chance, and I said I feel a little bit like a medical student right now, because I just happened to see in the New England Journal of Medicine that came to our door yesterday, there is an article actually that I'm looking at now. It's Kistler and Burden on Towards a Medical Ecology of Attention. So a little different than attentiveness, but it's all kind of part and parcel of the same thing. But just saying how difficult, so your question about obstacles, how our systems are really not set up in the productivity pressures that Andrea mentioned, and all of the multitasking and our devices that are always at our side that are really set up to distract you and not really allow you to provide the attention that every human being in front of you actually deserves. And the article talks a bit about how we can organize to optimize attention. But one quote that they have here from Rita Sharon, actually from Columbia, the Narrative Medicine Program, I think is really important. And she wrote that attention seems to be the most pivotal skill with which to endow a health professional who wants to be a healer. And so kind of getting back to what Andrea said about how do we see ourselves and what we do, if it's really that we're healers, then attention, attentiveness is also, I think, such a critical element and very much a moral element when you are in the business or in the kind of in the vocation of caring for people. So I would have to put in a plug there for listening.
Nice. Thank you, Bonnie. I mean, when you speak about attentiveness and attention, it reminds me of that aspect of John Luk's story where he's listening to the patient and calling himself out and saying, no, I have to pay attention here, and to really connect on an interpersonal level. So John, if I direct this next question to you, in terms of human flourishing, you think about human flourishing, it sounds like something we can all get behind. But it doesn't take long to discover that people disagree, often in deep ways, about what constitutes flourishing. And even if they can find some level of agreement, they often disagree regarding the best means by which to attain it. We're also in the middle of a pandemic, further challenging our capacity to flourish by any definition. How do we grapple with these realities within the context of medicine and healthcare, especially in an increasingly divisive and divided society?
Wow, that's an incredible question. And I think that my first response would be to reflect back on Cheryl's opening remarks. I think that our opportunity to flourish is very much a personal journey as well as a collective journey. And so in that journey, there will be highs and lows. There will be the opportunity to grow and to experience life around us. And I think one of the things that really has resonated with me as I think about this topic has been the opportunity for me to be surprised in this. As a pediatrician, I'm very much an optimist, and I see the opportunity of growth in all of us as individuals, as peers, as fellow human beings. And I realize that in that experience of life together, there are going to be moments of experiences that really challenge us and call for us to really put on the opportunity to show what we can do. It really puts to the test our resiliency, our grit. It actually can give us the opportunity to show our best. And I think that's what the pandemic has done. I read about and I hear about the amazing stories of our practitioners, our students, our physicians, and our healthcare heroes around the country, and what they've done to help our community, to help our nation. And I think the notions of character and caring are quite adequately displayed in those actions and intentions. And I think that that's really an important opportunity for us as we think about how we flourish and to create that state of wellness in totality. Because I think it's very much a journey of this as it is a goal for us to get there. And in doing so, we open ourselves up along that journey to be surprised that there are going to be moments where we learn. There are going to be moments that we hurt and we are in pain. And we share that sometimes in common with each other. I think the pandemic has created that commonality in the situation. And so I really look forward to our participants' contribution in this, because even though we have a common understanding of this, it very much is a personal perspective and through our personal lens that we look at this from our life journey, from our experiences, and how it really impacts and influences our growth. The experience of how we create that sustainability, the notion of having diastole to systole and creating that balance is so wonderful in that. And sometimes that is very challenging. And what is really helpful from my own personal perspective has been the courage, the encouragement, and the support of my peers, of my colleagues in this journey, to realize that we all embark on this and we don't do so alone and not in the dark.
Thank you, John, for both the reflections on human flourishing and that journey, as well as to all of our presenters, Andrea, Bonnie, and John as well. At this time, our Q&A is completed. And now I'm going to transition over back to John to tell us a little bit more about the breakout sessions that we're about to go into.
Terrific. Thank you, Chris. I am delighted that you have the opportunity to listen in on the conversation. I hope that it has really piqued in you some really great and rich thinking. And this is where our next step will give us the opportunity to share. So we're going to engage in a smaller group think and discussion. And we're going to use the opportunity to have this in smaller groups, but also to use the Jamboard feature. Jamboard is a shared platform through which we can actually share our thoughts and gather our thinking too. So I ask of you to think about, what does human flourishing look like in your setting? What does it involve? How does caring and character influence flourishing in your setting? Perhaps think about ways to enhance or improve that in human flourishing too. So it's a great opportunity for us to embark on this discussion in our breakout rooms. All right, we should be returning here momentarily. Well, I hope that your breakout room had some rich discussion as mine did. Really had great opportunity to listen and share and expand our thinking too. And I really thank you for engaging and sharing also through the Jamboard. We're going to collect all that information and distill it for sharing in a later date. Our next activity is an opportunity for you now to help consider and think about your own understanding, your own thinking around this human flourishing. And the exercise is called a 6-word story. Next slide, please. 6-word story, your human flourishing story. And so this is an opportunity for you now to think about how you can create an entire story with just 6 words. What does human flourishing mean to you? How might you be able to create this? And it should be only in 6 words. It should be complete in 6 words. You can create several drafts of it. I recommend that you use the chat feature to post it and share. Next slide, please. You can work through several drafts. Here are some examples. The 6-word story originated with Ernest Hemingway when he was challenged to write a story in 6 words. And this is what he wrote: for sale, baby shoes, never worn. Where's joy? Here and there, arms wide open, ready to hug. So I invite you to think about your human flourishing journey, your understanding human flourishing. What is your 6-word story? Post it on the chat. I'll read it out loud. Kind words, gentle touch, small joys. Thanks, Cheryl. So many ways to reach out. Pause, notice, inquire, listen, react, act. Wisdom, developing and sharing, windy road. I am human, you are human. Joy to share, here and there. No flourishing unless I am good. Finding space to support and to restore. Caring, a character caring connection creates human flourishing. Terrific 6-word stories here. Best version of selves, systems, and society. More of you, less of me. Wow, breathe, recognize others, warmth, listen, growth. We have some amazing 6-word stories here. Keep it coming. Stronger together, invite others to join. Struggle and joy, so true. Care to share, connect, listen often. Start with from within, spread unrelenting love. Wonderful. Wonderful stories popping up here. A sense of humor is essential. Terrific. Genuine connection with caring and presence. Mostly the same, but differences matter. Terrific. There's some great 6-word stories here on human flourishing. Open heart, listening ears, kindness, grace. Thanks, Rebecca. I agree, Andrea. I would post them all too. We might be able to string these all up. Well, I want to thank you for sharing your 6-word story. And I want to invite you to continue thinking around this too and creating a 55-word story out of your 6-word story. We have the opportunity to gather again in smaller groups, up to 15 participants over these following sessions, hosted by Elizabeth, Bonnie, and me. The opportunity would be to continue to think about, to discuss, to expand and share our stories and to explore our continued human flourishing. So I invite you to do that. Watch for the email that will come to share their 55-word story. You can also visit our KNN website for more information too. Cheryl?
Thank you, John. I had to go on unmute. So thank you, everyone. On behalf of the KNN board, thank you for taking time to join us this afternoon. I agree with John. The 6-word stories were really amazing. And we'd also like to extend our thanks to our wonderful presenters, facilitators, partners, and the generosity of the Kern Family Trust and the Kern Family Foundation, without whom this discussion series would not be possible. Following this session, the slides and a post-event evaluation will be available through the registration portal, and we'll send an email with a link and more instructions. And particularly because this is the first session in the series, we really would ask you to take a moment to complete the evaluation, because your feedback will help us to evolve the content of our future presentations to make sure they are as valuable as possible. We also invite you to consider registering for our April 27th session on seeking strength in times of crisis, something many of us are grappling with right now. And we will send a notice with registration when it opens. Next slide, please. In closing, I would like to share a quote from Barbara Fredrickson that I think captures the spirit of our time together. Flourishing is not a solo endeavor. Once again, thank you to everyone for contributing to this important discussion. We welcome you to continue this journey with us. Take care.